Kyle Burke. That's Kyleburke. I live at Springport, Indiana. Springport is between Muncie and Newcastle. I can get to the south side of Muncie about as quick as I can get to the north side of Newcastle. And I guess we'll start. Hi, I'm Kyle Burke.
All right, Mr. Burke. Let's see here. What's your first recollection of Borg Warner?
My first recollection, well, both my parents worked out there years ago. And my mom, if I'm not mistaken, my mom quit working there when I was born. And my dad quit working there when Westinghouse come to town, because he worked at Borg Warner, but he might work 6 months, be laid off for 6 months. And when Westinghouse come to town, he made the decision that the stability of Westinghouse might be a little bit better, so he left and went to Westinghouse, and he worked there. I think it was probably 18, 19 years before he was killed in a car wreck coming home from work. And then I remember I was in first or second grade, I believe it was, and my mom come picked me up at school for lunch one day and took me home for lunch, and she said, I want to tell you something. She said, I've got me another job. And she started at Ball Corporation then, and she ended up retiring from Ball Corporation several years ago. So, but like I said, when the two of them were working, I really, that would have been in my early years before I was in school. And, really probably the first recollection that I ever had was when I hired in, out at 83, or, I knew of Borg Warner and everything, but, and I knew that they had a history of, you'd work, get laid off, work, get laid off. And I hired in 83, and other than when they might shut down for an extra week at Christmas or extra week, 4th of July week, something like that, I was never really laid off until last summer. And they laid me off for 6 weeks last summer, and that was about a year and a half into the announcement that they were going to close the doors. Really didn't expect to go back to work then, and they called me back to work, and I worked up until December, and then I was laid off December, January, February. At that point, I really thought I was done, and then they called me back March 1st, worked till April 10th, and then that was it. That's when they finally terminated me.
Wow. So your family was really a big part of all the corporations that have kind of left town, it seemed like, or was it connected in some way?
Yeah, you had Marhofer that was here years ago. I had an uncle that worked for them. Don't think I had anybody that I can remember that worked for Chevy. But as far, like I said, it was kind of strange. There was one time I went to the crib, and I'm going to say I'd probably worked there maybe about 10 years, something like that, at Borg Warner. I went to the crib to get something. I was standing there waiting on them to get the parts for me, whatever it was. And there was a bulletin board up on the wall, and it had an old picture there. And I was looking at that picture, and it was taken in 1957, and it was after February, and I was born in February of '57. And I can't remember. I'm thinking I might have been about 3 months old when that picture was taken, and I was looking at the people in the picture, and all of a sudden I looked at this one guy and looked a little bit more, and I thought, that's my dad. And it was a picture that they'd taken of everybody in the crib that worked in there at that time. And I can't even remember the individual who was the head over the crib. I said, that's an interesting picture. I said, it's got my dad in it. And I told him about my dad and everything. He took it down and gave it to me. So I've got that to this day. Don't know where it is. It's at the house someplace, but I've got it. But yeah, my mom and dad both worked there for a while, and then, like I said, my mom went to Ball Corp, which isn't here anymore. My dad went to Westinghouse, which isn't here anymore. So
pardon me for asking, I should probably know this, but what is the crib?
The crib was where you would have, if you need to go get tooling, like you had expendable tooling that inserts, you could go get shop towels, gloves. The crib was just where they kept tools and parts, expendable tools and parts, things like that. Mop buckets, just all sorts of stuff. That's what the crib was. If you needed something for the job, you'd go to the crib and get it.
So when you were growing up and there were all these fairly large corporations that hired a lot of folks in Muncie, like we said, the Westinghouse, the Ball Corps, the Borg Warners, the Chevys, did you always see yourself kind of staying here and working at one of those plants, or how did that?
Didn't really see myself staying here, but that's just ended up what happened. If hindsight's always 20/20, my wife and I have both oftentimes commented, why didn't we get out of here when we were young, didn't have kids, before we got totally tied down and everything. But it's something that you just kind of fall into easy, staying here. The ones that pick up and move, that's not necessarily the easy way to go. And like I said, I've got one son that lives up in Green Bay right now, and he's 21, and it never really occurred to me at 21 to do something like that. And he did it. I hope everything works out for him up there. But just never, out of high school, there used to be a little piano string factory in Moreland, Indiana, made piano strings. And I got on there a few months out of high school, and I worked there for 8 years until I got on at Borg Warner. And, right out of high school, getting a job like that, all I was looking for was spending money, and that was giving me spending money. And like I said, I was there for 8 years, and then I come to Borg Warner. They were hiring and put in an application, and they hired me in '83. And I was probably just about in the middle of the 83 people, because they started hiring, I think, pretty much in about February through about August, September. And they hired me in July. And I'm going to say there was about around 350, I think, give or take a few, that they hired in '83. And the strange thing was, there was people they hired after me that got laid off several times. There was people with more seniority than me that got laid off several times. But up until last year, I was never what I considered really laid off. And there was just a window of us there in '83 that we never got laid off. They would close the plant for an extra week, like I said, at a certain time. Things were a little slow. We always got the 4th of July week off, so they may close the plant, a week before, a week after. Instead of giving us 2 or 3 days off at Christmas, they may close the plant, for the whole week. But to just really be laid off and not know if I was going to get called back, that never happened till summer of '08, last year.
How did that work that people with more seniority were laid off before you? Did you have a job that...
No, they were laid off before I ever hired in. And that's kind of what it was. Before they hired us in '83, there was people that were already there that would get laid off, brought back, laid off, brought back. Well, then they hired all of us in '83, and the majority of us never got laid off. And then they hired people after us, and they would get laid off, brought back, laid off, brought back. But that's how that worked out. Once they hired the people they hired in '83, we never got laid off until pretty much they closed the plant.
Was that because in the early '80s did Borg Warner do very well?
Well, it just worked out that the work was there for us. When we hired in '83, through the '80s and through the '90s, there was just enough work there that it kept us employed. The ones that in '83, like I said, is kind of strange. When you tell people that, they kind of have the look that you had on your face.
How can that be? While at Borg Warner, can you kind of run through some of the jobs that you did out there? What'd you start when you walked in that first day?
When I walked in that first day, you know, here's this big plant, machines everywhere, and you learned real quick, don't walk down the middle of the aisle because you'd get run over. Because there was people that had jobs to do. They were on Kalamazoo's. The Kalamazoo's was, you know, maybe about the length of the couch, a little bit longer, just made out of metal, 3 wheels. And that's what the skilled tradesmen used. They had haul stuff on it, pull, you know, their tool carts with them, whatever. You know, and they had job to do. So the first week of orientation, we learned when you're walking down the aisle, stay to the side of it. And, you know, people would come in there and they'd say, how do you know where to go? Well, all the posts, you know, there were posts all throughout the plant that held the ceiling up and everything. And they were numbered and lettered. And they started in one corner, and this is 0A. And as they went south, I believe it went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As they went west, it went A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you know. And then when they run out of, you know, the alphabet, I don't know if they ran out of the alphabet or not, I can't remember. But you know, if you said go to post 27A, well, you knew where to go. And, you know, it seems so simple now, but when first walked in there, I mean, you know, machines everywhere because they had machines crammed in just everywhere. Because when I hired in, there was about 2,500 people out there. And, you know, at one time, Borg Warner here in Muncie, I think they employed about 5,000. But when I hired in '83, it was around 2,500. And a lot of people, a lot of machines in there. But it was a big place. And the first thing that I did, I ran lathes. And they just, they turned a spindle down. And but over the years, there were several different jobs that I did. You know, I did production where, you know, you made the parts up, worked in assembly where you assembled everything. For 8 years, I think it's about 8 years, I was in supervision. Started out in maintenance supervision, and then I went to production supervision. And then I went back on the floor in the union. And the last, I'm going to say 7 to 8 years probably, I was in the quality department when they would have quality issues. Either the units would come down and we'd check them out, or rejects off the assembly line, we would tear them apart, figure out what the problem was with it, and then take all the good parts, ship them back to assembly, and get rid of, you know, if there was something broken or not right, or not the size, specs, or whatever, you know, get rid of that part. But just about everything in there. So.
How'd you guys do out there in terms of quality? Was it something you took pride in? Is it something
you know, Borg Warner Muncie was always known for its quality, and I think it will always be known for its quality. Now, you know, we had issues out there. You know, any plant like that's going to have issues, but if we had a problem, we caught it, and you know, very seldom. You know, when you consider the volume of what was built out there over the course of all those years, had very little problems with our customers. You know, granted, you're going to have a part here that you can't help but have something get out in the field occasionally, but for the most part, Borg Warner Muncie was known for good quality, and you know, the customer never had to wait on us. I mean, we got the part to them when they needed it. So.
After that first day in '83, or around the time you hired in, what were the older guys that had been there for a while? How'd they treat you? Was it kind of a hazing type thing when you came in? Or
no, there was a lot of, I guess you could say, shenanigans that went on back then that didn't in the later years. There was one thing that they would like to do, but it wasn't necessarily just to the younger people. They'd do it to anybody they could. They had a dicom, and what this dicom was, you could you could put it on metal, let's say like on aluminum. You'd paint it on the aluminum, and then you could scribe, whatever you wanted on it, if you needed to make cuts or something, and that way you could see where to make the cuts. Well, that Dicom, it was a big thing. They'd go into the office, pick the phone up, run some of it around the ear of the phone and set it down. Well, somebody'd go to answer the phone, pick it up, put it to your ear. Now you got a blue ear. And there was they'd go up sometimes in the bathrooms and put it, the toilet seats were always black. They'd put it on the toilet seat and you wouldn't notice it till you sat down on it and everything. But there was guys that'd sneak up behind guys if they'd laid their head down at break time or whatever, especially on the off shift, maybe just rest their eyes for a minute. They'd come up, paint the heels, especially if they had a brand new pair of shoes. Oh, they'd paint them yellow, red, whatever color they could get. There really wasn't, I never really got hazed or anything, don't ever remember anything like that. It was just back then, the work environment, the people enjoyed their work, they had fun, they enjoyed coming into work. And, when you do that, you're going to pull some pranks on coworkers. You're going to have fun, and that's the way it was when we hired in. So,
why do you think that changed over time, or when did it change?
Sadly to say, it changed when probably the best way to say it would be some company policies changed, when management changed. It just in the latter years. It just got to where, I'm trying to figure out how to put it. It just got to where things weren't as fun. It just became a job. And when something just becomes a job and it's not fun anymore, that doesn't say a whole lot in my book for a place, and that's kind of how I felt like it become in the latter years. Part of it was management attitude, probably. You could talk to management and they'd probably have a different take on it. But as far as my take on it, just company policies, it got to where it was more about get the parts out, get the parts out, get the parts out, and if you got the parts out and you had, 5 minutes extra time, well, you could have got another part out, whereas, years past, you got the numbers out you needed to get out, and, if you wanted to take a little 5-10 minute break, you could, and nobody said anything. But it just, probably the best way to put it, later, when it got later on in the years of when I was there, probably the best way to put it, there was just more whip cracking, trying to get more, and that's the way corporate is anymore. It seems like, whether it's Borg Warner or wherever, we can't get enough out. So,
did the change in atmosphere within the plant, did that affect the quality of the products that were being put out? Did that
I don't think it affected the quality as far as the workers went, but at times, there was times when I think some decisions were made. Okay, that's all right. We can go ahead and let that pass. We need the parts too bad. And I did see that on occasion. And it wasn't so much the workers themselves as it was, and I wouldn't even say it was the management on the floor, that was our bosses. It was the people over top of them that, they just kept looking at numbers. Hey, we need to get this out. We need to get this out. And, and when I was working in the quality department of it, the last 7 to 8 years, there, and like I said, we didn't let the stuff get out to the customer, but there was a lot of stuff that we went through, had to sort through and check to make sure that everything was all right and it didn't get out to the customer. So it probably affected quality inside the plant, but it didn't get outside of the plant, if that makes any sense to you.
You still caught everything.
Yeah. We caught everything, but I could not sit here and honestly say we caught everything 100%, because you're not going to catch everything 100%. You're going to have some things that are going to get out there. But, as far as anything massive, no. We caught the stuff in plant.
How would you describe management and worker relations throughout your time at Borg Warner? 26 years, I guess, about that.
I was fortunate. I always got along with my supervisors, and I had some good ones, and you had some supervisors in there, some upper management, that you weren't going to get along with no matter what. But I was fortunate to get along with the ones that I had. But at the same time, I come to work on time, and I did my job when I was there. So I tried my best not to give them a reason, to have to get on me, to keep an eye on me, and I was just going in and doing my job. I was going in trying to do what they were paying me to do. And but there was some supervisors, even if you did that, or upper management, that they were a bear to work for. So, but for the most part, I think, especially the supervisors on the floor, for the most part, I don't think anybody had a whole lot of trouble with the majority of them. So,
what kind of things did the other guys do, perhaps, that led to a tense relationship between? You said you came to work and you.
Well, you would like anything, you're going to have some people that are going to miss a lot of work. You're going to have people that are going to come late to work. You're going to have some people, and it wasn't everybody, but when you've got hundreds or a couple thousand people, I think anybody would be amiss to think that everybody's going to be the perfect worker. And you would have some people that might not be given as much as the worker on each side of them. And it is just things like that. There were some people that I worked with over the years that you would think, man, how do they keep a job? But on the other hand, I worked with a lot of good people out there. And you hate it for them that the plant closed, because they were good workers, they were good people just trying to make an honest living. And unfortunately, the bottom dollar, I think, is what it boils down to. And and it's, when a plant closes like that, it's kind of, anymore, it's like a catch-22, because with 401ks and everything, and I don't know if a lot of people stop to think about this, with 401ks, you're invested in companies. You have stocks in these different companies. Well, you want to see your stock do good. You want to see it go up. Well, a lot of times when your stock goes up and it's doing real good, it's because they've closed a plant or they've done something. When it went public that they were going to close Borg Warner in Muncie, go back and look at the dates and look at the stock. It shot up. Well, anybody out at the plant that had Borg Warner stock, yeah, their stock went up. They made money, but they're losing their job. And that's where the catch-22 comes in. And a lot of people don't stop to think about that. Everybody wants their stock to do good, but they don't want it to do good because they're losing their job. If somebody else loses their job, okay, my stock's doing good. And that's just, it's a bad situation, when you start thinking about it like that, because, what do you do?
I'd like to turn now to the union if we can, and just start off by asking, what was your involvement with the union? Were you very involved?
I'll be honest. I wasn't involved with the union. I was thankful to have the union. The union has good good qualities, and I think the union has its place. But I was just never one to be real active with it. I just wasn't. Now, there was a lot of people out there that were very active with it from the day that they hired in till the day they closed the doors. There's people that was very active with the union. It just wasn't me to be very active. I was grateful to have it, but I wasn't very active with it.
Why were you? Can you just name some reasons why you were grateful to have it?
Well, you're grateful to have it because, number one, I wouldn't have had the pay, I wouldn't have had the benefits had it not been for the union. And if you run into a problem, you had the union there to back you up. Really the only problems I ever had, but I would get my union officials, was if there was a discrepancy in my paycheck or something like that. I never really had any reason probably to get a hold of my steward or my committeeman or whatever. And a lot of times when I did, it was just to try and get some information, hey, what's going on with this or that or whatever. But, the days of the unions, I think, are slowly coming to an end, and with the big three, what they've gone through here with, their bankruptcies and everything, and, having to have the government help them out and all that. Even those unions, I think, are realizing that the days of them being just, in so much power, I think it's dwindling. And it's a shame because, I think unions had a good place, and corporate America, unfortunately, I think, has found a way to get around them. And part of that was close plants and move them overseas, move them south of the border. And I've kind of got a theory on that, and whether it's true or not, I don't know, but you had all these companies that were here in America, and all of a sudden, I think you had a couple, three of them thought, you know what, if we move things overseas, move it south of the border, we don't have to pay the insurance, we don't have to pay the salaries, but we can still get the product, bring it back up here, resell it, and make that much more profit. Well, that was all fine and dandy for the first two or three that did it, because you still had enough of a base of good paying jobs in this country to buy the product. Well, as more and more companies start doing that, you start having less and less of the companies here paying the good wages where people can buy the products, and then you get to a point, okay, you've taken all the good paying jobs, moved them out of the country, you've replaced them with jobs that pay half of what these people used to make, but your product is still the price of what it was before. I made good money out at Borg Warner. When I finished, I made $22 an hour. I can't buy a $40,000 vehicle making $22 an hour. How do they expect me to do it making $10 an hour? And a lot of your jobs, they say, look at all the jobs we're bringing in and everything. Whether it's Obama, whether it was Bush, whether it was Clinton, whoever, they always tout all the jobs coming in. Well, yeah, you're getting a lot of jobs coming in, but those jobs coming in are not $20, $25 an hour jobs. They're $10 to $15 an hour jobs at best. And when your product, the price of your product isn't coming down, but your pay scale is going down, you see what's happened,
Did the union have a role in creating this situation where plants were headed south or out of the country? Were there any excesses within the union that you saw?
And it's just my opinion, I think probably the union and corporate America maybe both had a little bit to do in that. With me, I never could understand how, and this is talking with the big three, talking about the big three, I never really could understand how a company could afford to pay somebody 95% of their pay scale and within setting home all the time, and whether that had anything to do with it, I don't know. I don't know all the particulars, all the fine points of the big three's contracts or anything. As far as at Borg Warner goes, I never really saw any excesses, and what a lot of people doesn't realize, the last, I'm going to say 2 to 3 contracts, maybe even the last 4 contracts that we signed, we gave up stuff every contract. We never gained anything. And when I tell people, the last, I know 10 to 12 years that I worked there, I never got a raise. I made less than I did because we gave up profit sharing. We gave up year-end bonus. We gave up cost of living allowance. We had to pay more for our insurance, which that's giving up more money there. And I really feel that the union there at Borg Warner did everything they could to try and keep the doors open. There was one time, it was the last contract that we signed, and I'm a firm believer that corporate brought that contract to us expecting that to be the contract we would turn down. We would say, no, we're not going to sign it, and they were going to close the doors then. They brought it to us. We said, okay, we'll sign it. We agree to it. And I feel like we threw a wrench in the works of them closing the doors at that time. We gave them everything they wanted in that contract. Then somebody said it was a year later. I'm thinking it was only about 6 months later. But it was 6 months to a year later. Corporate come back at us and said, we can't keep the doors open. We need more. And that's when we said no. We've given enough. If you're going to close the doors, close the doors. And that's when they made the announcement they'd close the doors.
Were the workers fairly united at that time?
I think they were. I think it was pretty much a unanimous vote. Not totally unanimous, but there was, I can't remember what the percentage was, but it wasn't like 60-40. I don't even think it was 70-30. I'm thinking it was around at least 80, maybe 90-some% that voted no, we're not giving up anymore. And I was one of them. There's no sense, because when you look back now, I think the handwriting was on the wall. I think they were going to close the doors no matter what. If we would have given them more concessions, all it would have done was made it cheaper for them to operate the place until they did close the doors.
You mentioned earlier that you even think it might have been better to have closed sooner for you, personally. Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, everybody out there was affected differently. Whether whether it was age, financial reasons or whatever. For me personally, now that the doors are closed, the economy's not doing very good. I'm 52 years old. If, let's say it was 10 years ago, just to use a number, if they were planning on closing the doors 10 years ago, for me, and I'm not saying this wouldn't have been good, some people would have said, oh, no, and some people would make the comment, look at the money you made over the past 10 years still being there. And that's true. I was able to work there that long. But 10 years ago, I'd have been in my early 40s, not my early 50s. The economy was doing a lot better at that point. So for me, I probably would have had a lot better chance of finding a job then than I do now. I'm still hopeful that I'm going to find a job now, but it would have just been better for me to have found a job back then probably. And, you stop and think about it, I could already have another 10 years working towards retiring from someplace else.
Did you do anything to plan for the end? You said you saw it coming.
Well, I can't really say that I saw it. I just had a funny feeling. Because the way corporate was with Borg Warner, I just had a funny feeling, all of us that hired in '83, and like I said, there was about 350 that I know of that hired in. And when they closed the doors, I think there was still about 250 of us working there. We would have been eligible to retire in 2013. That would have been a tremendous burden on Borg Warner to pay the retirement for that. And I just felt like it was just a gut feeling of mine that Borg Warner did not want to do that. So what I did over the last few years, when I started thinking about all this, interest rates dropped on houses, I refinanced. I was owing 20 years on my house at that point, took it down to a 10-year loan. So as of right now, I only owe about a year and a half on my house. So financially, yeah, to lose a job like that, I'm not going to sit here and say it doesn't hurt, because it does. But financially, my family and I we're fortunately in a lot better shape than a lot of other people. So.
Did the union play much of a role? You mentioned you weren't really that involved with union activities, but did the union have a role within the Muncie community?
Yeah, they were active in the community. At Christmas time, I know they would gather, or they would collect money or presents for different charities or whatever. They had an active role in the community, and it was one that I was glad that they did have, because that since the union, I can't remember how long it will be before the union will totally be disbanded. I think the place has to stay closed for like 5 years, something like that, or whatever. But I think the union has done good things with the community over the years, that it'll have a good legacy with the community. Something I would have liked to seen happen, which when you start getting UAW International involved, that tends to change some things there. But our union had money in an account. We had a balance, and what I would have liked to have seen done was gone around to the area high schools and endowed a scholarship in the name of Local 287. And that way, each year, there could have been a child from, the schools here in Delaware County and maybe some of the surrounding counties, some of their schools that had a lot of people from that community work. They could have gotten a scholarship every year. And, unfortunately, that's not going to happen. When all this started coming down, you had UAW International, they kind of, I think, froze everything, and basically Union Hall and everything, I think, became theirs at that time. So, but as far as the union being active in the community, they they did have an active role on various things. And like I said, I'd have to, you'd have to check with somebody else to find out everything they did do. But I know, you know, Toys for Tots, I know that was one of the things they did every year. I know a lot of people out there gave blood and things like that. So,
can you describe your feelings toward the International? Are you bitter about them, or many of your other work friends?
I'll be honest.
Taking your money?
I don't like UAW International. I felt like all they did was take my money and never give me any representation whatsoever. It just seemed like when they announced that the doors was closing, it seemed like the International should have had more of a role in it because of things that they've probably experienced in the past with other plants closing and everything. And I'm not against the union. I just wish we could have been a part of another union other than UAW International.
Were you a part of the 1989 strike? You were, weren't you?
That was a point where, when I mentioned I was in supervision for 8 years. And when I went into supervision at that time, if you stayed in supervision, I think, I can't remember, 30 days, 90 days, something like that, you gave up your right to go back to the union. So at that time, I was in supervision. I didn't have any return rights back to the union. Now, it was a contract or two later, can't remember, it might have been the next one. The company, there was just a handful of us that had went into supervision under that. And the company had wanted to get us our return rights back with no loss of seniority time on the floor. And the union said, sure, it's going to cost you this, it's going to cost you that. You know, and that's the way negotiations work. You know, I don't know what the union got for allowing us to get our return rights back, but the company said fine. And so there was one contract where they voted on it, and I got my return rights back. They voted on a Saturday. I was on midnights, which meant my Monday was, I went to work that Sunday night. And my boss come in that Monday. I told him I was going back to work. He said, when's this going to take effect? I said, well, my pay period for supervision ends Wednesday. Thursday looks good to me. And that Thursday I was running a machine again, and I was happy to be back.
Why do you think the company cared about giving you your
I don't know.
back?
I have no idea. I couldn't even speculate, but I had union officials tell me that the company approached them about that, and don't know why, just thankful they did it. But anyway, once again, during that strike of '89, I was in supervision at that time. Didn't care to be in the plant, but as supervision, you know, if I refused to go in, because they had us running machines and everything, if I refused, you know, they'd have fired me, you know, and then which in retrospect, maybe that'd have been a good thing since they closed the doors, I don't know, but did not like being in there. Had a lot of good friends out on the picket line. When I would see somebody out, whether it was at the mall or whatever, I'd go up to them, I'd say, I don't want to know what you're doing, I just want to know how you're doing, you know. And fortunately, I feel like, you know, when I was in supervision, I didn't make any enemies. You know, I don't, you know, and then I probably did. There's probably some people out there that hated my guts, you know, when I was in supervision. But for the most part, when I was in supervision, I tried to treat people the way I wanted to be treated. And I think for the most part, that's how a lot of the supervisors were. But in later years, I just don't feel like corporate wanted their supervision to treat people like that. And that's when the fun of working out there, kind of ceased to exist.
So at one point, workers seemed to be having a lot of fun and were very together. What did that mean for the community when you mentioned seeing people out?
Oh yeah, well, even to this day, I'll be out someplace and I'll see somebody say, hey, how you doing, blah, 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 all this and everything. And if my wife or any of my kids are with me, we'll walk off and they'll look at me and they'll say from work, I'll say, yeah. You see people all the time, and right now, the place to see everybody's up at the unemployment office, unfortunately. I mean, you go up there, you're bound to run into a half a dozen people at least any day you go up there that you worked with, and that's an unfortunate situation. But, you would see people out, I'd even be out of state and see people, from work that I knew, and talk to them. And, some of them you might not remember the name, but you remember the face. And, and it's sad. Now, there's a few people from work that I still keep in touch with and see. But, there's some other good people that's out there that, I'm not going to see anymore, and that's one of the unfortunate things about it, one of the side effects of what's happened.
How did local residents in Muncie view Borg Warner workers?
Well, I think there was a big misconception. I think a lot of people thought that we got paid what the big three did, because we made stuff for Ford, we made stuff for GM, and I think there was always a big misconception that we made what Ford workers did. We had the same package benefits that they did, and they couldn't have been any farther from the truth. I mean, we weren't anything like any of the big three. But I've never experienced any ill wills from anybody because I worked at Borg Warner. Whether somebody else did, I couldn't tell you. But whenever I mentioned, to anybody that I worked at Borg Warner, it's all, well, okay, there wasn't ever any hostilities or anything. So,
how was working at Borg Warner? You mentioned you had a son, a wife. How was having a family and working at Borg Warner? Did they do anything to I don't know, bring families together? The guys that work there?
Well, Borg Warner, they would have things. The union would have things out the union hall. They'd have Santa Claus out there at Christmas time, and families could take their young kids out there. They would have Easter egg hunts. The union did things like that. On occasion, Borg Warner would have an open house. And I always enjoyed taking my family through an open house, let them see where I worked, what the machines were that I ran and everything. But I'd say I was there almost 26 years. I can think of 3 open houses, but if they had any more than that, I honestly don't remember them. So, but that was really about the only thing the Borg Warner ever did as far as bringing, families, the workers and their families together in was when they would have the open houses.
My next question is kind of open-ended. So whatever pops in your head, just go. What were some,
this could be dangerous.
This could be dangerous. I hope so.
It'll be good for ratings.
And the question is just, what were some of the good and some of the bad aspects of working out at Borg Warner? What pops into mind when I say what was good about working out there? What was that?
What was good? Obviously the pay, the benefits for this area. I was very thankful to have a job at Borg Warner. It put food on the table, clothes on the back of my kids, family, roof over our head. We were able to take vacations, have good times. If somebody got hurt, and when you have 3 boys in sports, somebody's getting hurt, even though the insurance might not have been the best, it did pay something. Other good things, some of the workers, even, not just the union, but supervisors, got a chance to meet a lot of good people, had a lot of good times, and there's been some of the workers that I've gone on vacations with before, So, that was a lot of the good stuff. Bad stuff, don't have much sense of smell or taste anymore. Because when you went in Borg Warner, it had an odor about it, and it was just all the cutting oils, cutting fluids in the air. You couldn't help but have it. And, over the course of several years, breathing that stuff in and everything, at least with me, my sense of smell is not quite what it used to be. But, that would be the first thing that would come to my mind. Second thing for me would be midnight shift. I'm not a midnight person. I like sleeping at night, being awake during the day. Now, there's some people that absolutely loved working midnights out there. Other people absolutely loved working afternoon shift. But when you're in a place like that, and seniority rules, which it should, the older people, the people with most seniority, get to pick the shift they want to. So for pretty much the first, I'm going to say 10 to 12 years, I was working midnight shift. It's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with me. I don't like that shift. Everybody knows I don't like it. And there was guys in the latter years when I would get put on midnights just for a week, some guys knew that I hated midnights, and boy, they just tease me about it and laugh and everything. But I'm trying to think, negatives. Really the work conditions were pretty decent. There could have maybe been, better work conditions in some areas, but for the most part, it wasn't too bad. But that's kind of a little bit on both ends of that question.
What do you think the closing of Borg Warner does to the Muncie community?
Oh, it obviously hurts. I mean, and it doesn't just hurt Muncie. It can hurt surrounding communities. Like I said, Borg Warner was in Delaware County in Muncie. I live one county south, Henry County, Newcastle area. I live at Springport. And there was a lot of people, not just in Delaware County, but the surrounding counties, Randolph County, Henry County, what's Anderson in Madison County, I think it is. But Blackford County, Jay County, just surrounding counties, everybody that worked at Borg Warner just wasn't from Muncie. So, it doesn't just affect the Muncie area, it affects the whole area. But, you look at Muncie over the past, since I've been around, Marhofer's not here anymore. Westinghouse, or AB&B, as it was when it closed, isn't here anymore. Chivy's not here anymore. Borg Warner's not here anymore. And here, I think just this past week, I think Duffy Tool announced they're closing their doors, I think, or somebody like that. There's another one here in town that I think is closing their doors. And when you look at what all of those places, how many people they employed, and the amount of revenue that come in, not just from what they paid their workers who then went out into the community and spent the money, but what taxes the corporations themselves paid. Anytime you lose something like that, it's a huge hit. Now, granted, Borg Warner, as maybe a lot of companies do, over the years they just kept downsizing and downsizing, so the hit wasn't as dramatic as it would have been if they still employed 2,500 people when I first hired in, and then all of a sudden they say we're closing the doors, and now you got 2,500 people out of work. They got rid of the transmission business. That got rid of some people. It just kept dwindling down until, there was, I think, probably 600 people out there, towards the end. And it still affects a community. And not just what's happened here in Delaware County. You look at Newcastle, Chrysler there. You look over at Anderson, Chivy over there. This area is just when it comes to manufacturing jobs, it's extremely depressed. You know, here in Muncie, you've got Ball State in the hospital. If it's not those two, you're either working in a store trying to sell stuff or you're working in a restaurant. I mean, there's some other little shops around or whatever, but there's just no manufacturing base in this area. And when you look across the country, there's not much of a manufacturing base compared to what it was 20, 30 years ago. And I think it's bad for the country. I really do, because like we hit on earlier, you've got all the good paying jobs going out of the country, and they're bringing the product back in to sell at the same price, but you don't have the people making the paycheck to buy it.
You know, Mr. Burke, we've pretty much exhausted all the questions I have to ask today, but I'd like to give you an opportunity at the end of this to just kind of say anything that comes to mind that we haven't touched on that you thought maybe we would touch on today. Maybe we've hit it all.
Oh, Lord. You're asking me to think now. It's sad. I was disappointed, and maybe disappointment's saying it too mildly, I don't know. When they come out and announce they were going to close the plant, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. I was disappointed, maybe, for me, like I said, in my situation, more in the timing than that they were actually closing it. Because, when I would think back, man, if they had done this 10 years ago, I'd probably be in better shape than I was now. But, I was disappointed. Can't really say that I was mad, because I was kind of expecting it, and I, over the years, I kind of resolved to the fact that, that might be what'll happen. And, it's a sad situation, but it's a situation that's out of my control. There's nothing I can do about it. There's no need for me to dwell on it. There's no need for me to cry about it. There's no need for me to worry about it. And like I told you, Channel 13 got a hold on me the day they announced it. And I'll just tell you what I told them. When one door shuts, another door opens. So I'm going to go through that door, see what happens.
Sounds great. Thanks a lot for your time today.